Today I'm going to show you a few simple ways to start the game strong. And that means playing good moves in the opening, which is the first 5-10 moves of the game. Now what you don't want to do in the opening is waste time moving random pieces and pawns and just hoping for the best. That's usually going to end in a disaster, especially if you're playing an experienced player like me. The best way to start strong is to develop your knights and bishops first. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So let's go to the board. All right, now what do I mean when I say develop your knights and bishops? Developing a piece means bringing it off its starting square and into the action. So I could develop this knight on the first move, since it can jump over other pieces. But if I want to develop this bishop, I need to move a pawn out of the way and clear a path. So that's why I think the best starting move is with a center pawn, because now this bishop is open to be developed, and if possible, I'd like to move my other center pawn as well. And now both of my bishops can be developed easily. Notice that if black makes some kind of mistake like this, these guys can already jump out and start doing damage. But even if black doesn't do something bad like that, let's say black still lets me just develop my knights and my bishops wherever I want. Well, I'm going to develop them like this, toward the center. The center is these four squares in the middle of the board. And I like to develop my pieces toward the center because a piece close to the center, like this guy, is attacking and defending a lot more squares than a piece like this that's just home asleep in bed, only attacking 3 squares. All right, so now that I've got my knights and my bishops developed, I'm ready to castle. And overall, I'm just going to have a great position for the middle game. Now let's take a look at some common opening mistakes. One mistake that I see from inexperienced players is developing the queen or the rooks first. Why is that usually not a good idea? Well, those pieces are valuable, and if you bring them out too soon, they might not be safe. In fact, they could even get captured if you're not careful. For example, if you start off like this, trying to develop your rook first, I'm going to move a center pawn and open up my bishop. And if you develop your rook here, I just munch it. So you lose a rook for a bishop already, which is a bad trade for you. Now let's say I'm playing black and I develop my queen first, like this. Well, you don't have to be scared of this queen. You could already start attacking it, like this. So I have to run away. And now you could attack me again by opening up your bishop. And I have to run away again. And now you could develop that bishop and attack me again. And notice I can't take your bishop because it's protected. So I have to run away again. And now you could develop your other bishop and attack me again. So look at what's happened. You've got 4 pieces developed. I've only got 1 because I've just been moving my queen around 1,000 times. And you're ready to castle, and I'm not. So you're just crushing me here. Another mistake I see inexperienced players make a lot is only moving pawns and not developing any pieces. So let's say white starts off like this, just moving a side pawn and not really helping anything to be developed or doing anything at all. So I open up my bishop, and white moves another side pawn like this. Maybe white is even like scared of developing his pieces or something. So I bring my knight out, and white moves another pawn, and I develop my bishop, and white moves another pawn. And now, can you see what really strong move I have? Boom. I can bring my queen out and checkmate white. So this is what happens when one side is only moving pawns and the other side is developing pieces. Now, I know I said earlier that developing the queen early can be risky, but of course all rules have exceptions. So here, bringing the queen out is obviously good because it wins the game immediately by checkmate. And I would definitely bring my queen out if I can capture something big for free. But if I don't see any good opportunity like that, I'm probably just going to stick with developing my knights and bishops first. So I want to talk to you about one of the most important things in chess, which is protecting your king. And the best way to do that is to castle in the opening. And after you've done that, make sure your castle position is safe. Now, a lot of times I see inexperienced players either forget to castle or maybe they think it's not important. Well, I think it's important. And I try to castle in the first 5-10 moves of the game. Before we get started, just to review a few rules about castling, you can't castle out of check, you can't castle through check, and you can't castle into check. And of course you can't castle if you've moved your king or your rook already. Okay, so let's go to the board so I can show you why I think castling is important. In the opening, both sides are going to be developing their pieces toward the center of the board. And that means there's probably going to be some action going on in the center, like pieces getting captured and lines getting opened up. And if your king is still in the center while all of this is happening, it's going to become a target. Like here, black's king is in check, and black's queen is under attack, and everything is just falling apart because the center got opened up and black's king was still in the center. So that's why it's important to castle early. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to try to develop my knights and my bishops first. And that's going to make it easy for me to castle early. So I've got my knights and my bishops developed. Now I can castle. And if the center starts getting opened up, like this, I don't have anything to worry about with my king. He's all the way over here. He's far from the action, so he's totally safe. Plus, now that we've castled, we can develop our rooks and use those to attack the center. So a good rule of thumb for castling is to try to castle in the first 5 to 10 moves of the game. If you get to like move 10 and you still haven't castled, take a moment and look at your king and think, is he really safe or not? All right, now what about castling on the other side, which is called castling queenside or castling long? So there's nothing wrong with that, but it is going to take a little bit longer. So it's a little bit less common. So I have to develop my knight and my bishop, and then I also have to develop my queen. So I have to take an extra move before I can castle queenside. And then even after I do castle queenside, my king is a little bit close to the center still, so I might want to take an extra move and scoot him over so that he's farther away and safe. All right, now once you've castled, you want to make sure that your castled position stays safe. So I've castled, and now take a look at these 3 pawns in front of my king. So these are like the bricks in my castle wall, and I don't want to move these pawns too much because I want to keep them connected to each other. I want to keep my castle wall strong. Now moving 1 pawn is usually no big deal. It might even be useful to give my king a little extra breathing room in case he gets put in check, but moving more pawns than that is not going to be a good idea. Like this is very bad. Black can just crash through, boom, and just break down our castle wall. And now look, like our king is in check and our knight is under attack. We're not safe at all anymore because we moved too many pawns in front of our king. All right, now just like all rules, we don't want to be following this rule about castling early, like mindlessly, without looking at the rest of the board. So, like in this position, should we castle? No, that's a bad move because black is attacking our bishop. If we castle, black is just going to take our bishop for free. So we'll just spend a move, take care of that first, and then we'll castle on the next move. So as we know, chess is a game of combat. And in this video, we're going to really get into the action. So I'm going to show you the 5 winning attacks. These are special moves, also known as tactics, that strong players use to capture their opponent's pieces or even to checkmate them. And once you learn these 5 tactics, you are going to be amazed at how often they start showing up in your own games and how easy it's going to be for you to beat people using them. So let's go to the board and get started. The first tactic is called a fork, or a double attack. It looks like this. White's knight is attacking black's king and black's rook at the same time. Now black can't move both of those in one move. Black has to choose which piece to move. In this case, he's in check, so he needs to move his king. And then we get to capture the other piece for free, the rook. So here's another example of a fork. Black can make a move to fork white's bishop and knight, so attack them at the same time. The rook comes down, and it's attacking both. White can only move one of them, and then we get to capture the other one for free. So that's a fork. The next tactic is called a skewer. It involves 2 of your opponent's pieces which are on the same line. So here the queen and the king are on the same diagonal. And we can take advantage of that by moving our bishop to that diagonal. So we put black in check, and when his king moves out of the way, we get to capture the queen behind it. Here's another example of a skewer. So white's knight and pawn are on the same file or column, and we can use our queen to skewer that knight and that pawn. So we move our queen onto that file, we attack the knight, and when the knight moves, we capture the pawn behind it for free. So that's a skewer. The next tactic is called a pin, and it's kind of the opposite of a skewer. So black's king and knight are lined up on the same file, and so is our rook. So that means that black's knight can't move out of the way, because then black would be in check. Now we can take advantage of that by putting black in check with our other rook. So we're checking the king, and black would like to block that check with the knight, but he can't do that because then he would be in check with our other rook. So this knight is pinned in place, it can't move. And that means black is in checkmate here. He has no way to get out of check. Here's another example of a pin where we're not trying to checkmate black, we're just trying to win one of black's pieces. So black's queen and king are on the same file, and we can take advantage of that by moving our rook to that file. So we're attacking the queen. The queen would love to move out of the way, but the queen can't because then the rook would be checking the black king. So black's queen is kind of helpless. The best thing that the queen can do is just capture our rook, and then we capture the queen. So black gave up 9 points, and we only gave up 5 points. So now we're winning by 4 points. So that's a pin. There's one more tactic which involves 3 pieces on the same line, and that's called a discovery. So here our queen and our bishop are on the same file as black's queen. So that means our queen could capture black's queen as long as we just move this bishop out of the way. So we move it out of the way with check. So black's in check, and we're attacking black's queen at the same time. So when black has to get out of check, now we capture the queen for free. Now why can't the knight just capture our queen back? That's because the knight is pinned. So just like I told you, these tactics show up all the time. Black can't capture our queen because then black would be in check. So we've got a pin and a discovery going on here. Here's another example of a discovery. White would be in check if we just move our bishop out of the way. So what's the best thing we can do with our bishop to discover that check on white's king? Boom. We move our bishop here and attack white's knight, which is not defended. So the king is under attack and the knight is under attack. White has to get out of check, and then we capture the knight for free. That was a discovery. All right, the last tactic is called a decoy, which just means a distraction. Sometimes you've got one of your opponent's pieces which is protecting a very important square, and you just want to distract that piece so that it's not protecting that square anymore. So you do a decoy. So we put black in check with our rook, and black has to capture our rook. And now the queen is not protecting the square anymore. So we sacrificed our rook on purpose in order to be able to move our queen to this square. And black is actually in checkmate here because we've got our rook protecting our queen. So black can't capture our queen. Here's another example of doing a sacrifice to distract one of your opponent's pieces. So we would love to move our queen down here and capture this pawn, but white's queen is looking at that square too. So let's just find a way to decoy white's queen away from protecting that. We can use our knight. Boom. Now white's in check. So the only way for white to get out of check is to capture our knight. Now the queen has been distracted, and we move our queen down and checkmate white. Once again, our rook is protecting our queen. So white can't do anything to get out of check, like capture our queen. So that was a decoy.